At the start of this season, a series of nerfs and changes to existing exotics and mods took place that royally ruined several great builds. I was a little chapped about that, thanks Luke. Now, a lot of these changes were both fair and justified. Geomags were far too strong and allowed for straight-up abuse of Chaos Reach. I'm having a hard time finding any sympathy for Shards of Galanor, but simply off principle, that also sucked as well. And then there was Skull of Dire Ahamkara, the absolute worst offender. It is a mere shadow of its former self. On a more positive note, the Skull of Dire Ahamkara nerf created space for other exotics to shine, mainly Mantle of Battle Harmony and Nezarec Sin, otherwise known as Ye Old Reliable. These exotics specifically are both extremely neutral and versatile, and the library of mods that'll work alongside them is actually astounding. So let's take a look at some skill trees and abilities, and we'll get this video going. Bottom tree, Voidwalker, emphasis on Devour. That's going to come up again near the end of this video. Devour. Charged melee kills regenerate health, can't go wrong with that. Feed the Void allows you to trigger Devour by consuming your grenade, which is extremely handy. Insatiable. Kills while Devour is active, reset the timer, and generate extra grenade energy. And lastly, Vortex. Nova Bomb creates a singularity that damages over time, and anything that dies in that radius triggers Devour or resets the existing timer. You might not take me seriously here, but just hear me out for a second. For your exotic slot, you're going to want to take Traveler's Chosen, and you're going to need the catalyst for this one. That is almost a requirement. Traveler's Chosen triggers osmosis on a grenade throw once you have the catalyst. This is extremely important for super stacking when we're talking about Nezarec Sin or Mantle of Battle Harmony for that matter. Osmosis will keep Abyssal Extractors or Energy Siphon active, keeping that steady flow of super energy charging swiftly. As for energy and heavy, the weapon classes themselves don't really matter all that much. Rather, it's Thresh you'll be looking for. Strong picks for Thresh are Retrofuturist and Hothead, just to name a few. Those are also the guns that I'm using for this video. All that super energy adds up on itself over time, and it's a perk that is well worth investing into this scenario specifically. Now, let's take a closer look at Nezarec Sin. We'll look at Mantle of Battle Harmony in just a second. Void kills grant Abyssal Extractors for 2.5 seconds. That timer maxes at 20. While Abyssal Extractors is active, the player will receive an additional 2.35% Rift energy per second, 3.65 grenade and melee energy per second, and 0.67% super recharge speed per second. That 0.67% might not seem like much, and realistically, by itself, it really isn't anything special. But when it's paired with a couple of very specific mods, that 0.67% is going to cut anywhere from 10 to 15 seconds off your super cooldown, which is already going to be booking it. As for Mantle of Battle Harmony, weapon kills with a matching subclass element grant a buff that changes depending on whether or not your super is already charged. If your super is still charging, Energy Siphon triggers. This is a buff that grants 3% extra super energy, functioning on a 2-second cooldown. If you're already fully charged, Absorption Cells will trigger instead. This is a 20% damage buff on matching elemental weapons. The buff maxes out at a 10-second duration, with each additional matching elemental kill adding a bit more time onto the counter. Now, let's take a look at some of these mods. For my helm, Elemental Ordnance, and 2 stacks of Hands-On. You'll be doing a lot of slapping things, trust me. Elemental Ordnance is there because it complements Devour. On my gauntlets, I've got Font of Wisdom. This is a T10 increase to Intellect, regardless of your current stat tier, and it lasts for 30 seconds. This can stack on Abyssal Extractors or Energy Siphon. On my chest piece, I've got Elemental Charge. This is going to turn all those void wells that are spawning from the unending stream of grenades that are flying from my hands into charges of light. And those charges of light are going to fuel my next mod of choice, which is Energy Converter. At 2 stacks, that's an additional 8.2% energy going into my super cooldown. I'm going to elaborate on the usage of this mod and Well of Potency near the end of this video because they're the more flexible of this bunch. Lastly, we've got Supercharged. This increases the number of charges you can carry up to 4, with a maximum of 5 if you slot charged up on another piece of armor. As for recommended stats, I like to keep my intellect at a T5 and my discipline at a T6 at the very least. Those are the only 2 stats that really matter, and there are numerous factors increasing those numbers as well, so while the stat tiers themselves may sound rather low, it does even itself out quite nicely. Now that we got all of that out of the way, let's go over how all of this works on a practical level. At its core, this is no different than taking advantage of Dire Ahamkara and Energy Converter. It's the same basic principle. Stack your charges and throw a grenade after a cast. The difference is that until Nova Bomb detonates, Energy Converter cannot be used. This is why we've got multiple different avenues of super return on our armor. Font of Wisdom, Abyssal Extractors, Well of Potency, even Energy Converter itself, assuming you're under 50% super cooldown. On the topic of Energy Converter, whether you max at 2 charges of light or 4 charges of light, honestly, that doesn't really matter. Ultimately, 4 stacks is going to give you a larger return on investment after the Nova Bomb detonates, but the rate at which your perks and mods will charge you makes it to where it almost doesn't even matter. Think about this for a second. Devour and Elemental Ordnance are the starting point. Devour is going to trigger Abyssal Extractors. That first grenade is going to start a chain reaction, if you will, because it does very, very many things. First, it's going to spawn a well, trigger Abyssal Extractors, and reset the Devour timer, all while restoring grenade energy. That well is going to charge you with light and provide a jump to T10 in intellect for 30 seconds. It'll also restore extra super energy if you're using Well of Potency instead of supercharge for the extra charges of light. On top of that, the next grenade you throw will consume both charges that the initial well gave you, restoring more super energy, and it just kind of snowballs into a circle. The rule of thumb here is you want to make sure every aspect of your loadout is returning extra super energy in one degree or another, and that's really why Traveler's Chosen is key here. When you throw that first grenade, Osmosis is going to kick in and the gun is going to start dealing void damage. Abyssal Extractors will basically just kind of max itself out, all while stacked on Font of Wisdom. What this does is create a combat scenario where you are not forced to rely on your energy ammunition to keep your super cooldown bolstered. Now you're using infinite white bricks, which is ultimately more effective since low health red bars are far more common of targets to begin with. They go down easily, which means Abyssal Extractors is not a hassle to keep active. That is the main goal. Keeping Abyssal Extractors and Font of Wisdom working together. As long as those two are active with large amounts of time left before they reset, you're free to swap to your Thresh weapons, which are going to bolster this even more. In my case, Retro Futurist is my go-to. Not only is it triggering Thresh, but it's also keeping both Devour and Abyssal Extractors active. At the end of the day, as long as those two abilities are active, both Abyssal and Wisdom, your super cooldown is going to see extreme speeds. Once it's past 50%, which believe me when I say that won't take long, you're basically just stockpiling charges of light to be used directly after a Nova Bomb detonation. Remember, that grenade does not need to kill anything, you just need to throw it, though throwing it will generate a well that'll kickstart the process again if you do manage to knock something with it, so I guess that's something to take into consideration. And for the love of God, don't do what I do. Do not instinctively and habitually hold on to grenades to store charges of light. You're just slowing yourself down at that point. Multiple ×2 energy converter throws are going to get you to 50% faster than a single ×4. That's because this turns into a circle where your grenade gives you a well, which gives you a grenade, which gives you another well, and you see what I mean. It's just easier to throw one at ×2. Just keep this in mind. This is a concept build more than anything else. I am actively working with the remainder of the Super Regen exotics to see what other workarounds might exist, so there will be more of these videos in the future. If you've got anything that you'd like to add to this, or you think something else would work a little bit better, I actively encourage you to leave a comment about it, or join my Discord and post your thoughts as a reply to the post that I've made about it in BuildShare. You guys know the drill. I'm gonna go back to my happy place and play Metroid motherfucking Dread.